In the center of a forgotten town stood a crooked row of houses. One of them, squeezed between a baker's shop and a tavern, had a worn-out sign above its door. It depicted an anvil and a hammer crossed behind a pair of pliers. But most passers-by didn't notice this detail or the peeling paint. They simply saw an old, dusty building that smelled of mildew and decay. For years, the shop's window displayed a jumble of gears, springs, and dull blades. And its bell above the door seemed to have fallen silent long ago. No one could remember the last time they heard its chime. A faded brass plate hung beside it, barely clinging to the wall, on which some letters managed to resist the onslaught of time. Edvard's Repair Shop. Some said his grandfather had founded it over 60 years ago. Others claimed it was here since the Great War, since before anyone could remember. And all agreed that no one had seen Edvard in almost 2 decades, not since he disappeared without a trace along with his father and brother. And yet people kept coming to the repair shop, although no one could recall why they came or even what they sought. They simply felt compelled to push open its creaking door and enter. Very few ever returned. Those who did emerged changed, bearing objects that soon altered their lives forever. The first was a young woman whose name no one remembered. She came looking for a lost glove, a simple black cloth one. When she pushed open the door, a raindrop tapped against the glass window above. Startled, she jumped back, only to find an identical glove resting on the counter, as if waiting for her. Her fingers closed around it. As soon as she slipped it on, the gloves began to itch. But she ignored it and hurried home. That night, while bathing, she noticed thin red lines crawling under her skin. Panic surged through her, but she dismissed it as her imagination. However, that night in her sleep, she felt her hands writhe and contort, pulling her fingers into impossible angles. She awoke screaming, only to find her hands now moved on their own. The stitching on the glove dug into her skin, and strange symbols were branded onto her palm. Every day these symbols throbbed, and her hands became more unruly. She hid them under thick woolen gloves, but they still wriggled, even as she carved words into the soft wood of the table. Words she couldn't recognize. And after 3 weeks, she vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the now blood-stained black glove on the shop's doorstep. A few days passed before the next customer dared to cross the threshold. A tired traveler stopped by to seek light. All he found was a small candle on the counter. Nonetheless, he tucked it into his pocket. Later that evening, hunger drove him to a nearby inn. As he sat down, he pulled the candle from his coat and lit it idly. A single flame sputtered to life, casting flickering shadows on the worn-out carpet. But that's when the room shifted. What moments before had been solid stone was now a swirling vortex of darkness. Curiosity overwhelmed him, so he stepped through. Inside, he found himself in a long, dark hall, stretching endlessly into the gloom. No light penetrated this place, not even starlight. Each step echoed loudly, and the darkness pressed against him like a physical force. All around him he saw vague shapes that seemed to watch him, and the feeling of unseen eyes on his back grew more intense. Panic tightened its grip on his throat, yet he couldn't turn back. The doorway had vanished, replaced by impenetrable darkness. Driven by primal fear, he stumbled forward, desperate to escape whatever lurked in the shadows behind him. Just as his resolve started to crumble, he saw a faint glow ahead. With renewed determination, he quickened his pace, hoping to find safety in the light. By morning, the innkeeper found him standing charred and lifeless before his door. His candle still burned in the center of his room, refusing to die. Sometime after that, a young man carrying a worn leather satchel sought shelter from the rain. Pushing aside the heavy curtain, he spotted a leather-bound book lying on the counter. He opened it and etched in strange characters. The words twisted on the page, forming an alien script that seemed to writhe like living things. Intrigued, he carried the book home, and that night he read it aloud. His voice resonated strangely, and the book pulsed with an unsettling warmth in his hands. As he read further, His voice changed, becoming deeper, chanting words he didn't understand. And when he closed the book, he felt an overwhelming urge to read it again. So he did. Hours turned into days, and he spent his waking moments deciphering the book's contents. But the more he learned, the stranger his voice became. It echoed and reverberated, echoing in the empty halls of his home. His eyes froze, his mouth kept reading until his throat dried up, and he fell silent, collapsing as his final word hung in the air. Only then did the book return to the shop on its own. Drawn by a strange melody, a young girl crossed the threshold. There, in the dim light filtering through the grimy window, stood an old violin. Without hesitation, she lifted it and played a short note. The sound resonated within her chest. Then she heard an answer, an echo bouncing back from the walls. Surprised, she tried again, and this time the echo followed her into the corner. The notes grew louder, filling the room, then spilling out onto the street, chasing after her. Alarmed, she fled to her home, locked the door, and hid under the covers. But the notes pursued her, seeping through the cracks, following her every move. Even in sleep she heard them, felt them in her breath. And slowly she stopped noticing everything else. Until one night she vanished. All that remained was the violin leaning at the shop's door. Over time, other customers appeared, each seeking something they didn't know they needed, each finding an object that sang to their deepest desires. A weary traveler found a cracked hand mirror. In it he saw himself reversed, smiling when sad, crying when laughing. Slowly he no longer knew which was real. In the end, his reflection disappeared, leaving only an empty room staring back. Then a young man discovered a rusted black key. He kept it, but that night doors appeared on every wall of his home. Each door opened to something different: his childhood, his death, unfamiliar rooms. By morning, his house had no walls, only the key swinging in the air. All these objects were tied to one thing: an old wooden chest in the shop's corner. Each disappearance left a new crack in its lock, glowing faintly with white threads. People believed that breaking the chest would bring back those taken by the shop. So one moonless night, the townsfolk gathered, determined to break into the chest and burn it. But just as they were about to strike the fatal blow, the lid opened on its own. White threads slithered out like serpents, each tipped with a blinking eye. And from within rose a shifting figure made of the objects themselves. A hand in the glove, a candle burning in its chest, a book for a face, a violin on its shoulder, a cracked mirror as its heart, and the black key embedded as a living lock. Before they could scream, the chest slammed shut and vanished. On the floor remained one word, stitched in threads: to be continued. This is where our story ends, but yours doesn't have to. If you want to continue experiencing the world of Edvard's repair shop, click on one of the 2 videos on screen now.